In this video, we explore one of history's most unlikely victories. 2,000 civilians defeating 40,000 Ottoman soldiers in 1475. Topography, strategy, and sheer willpower turned a simple church wall into an impregnable fortress. Now, before you picture an elaborate military stronghold, let me be clear. This was literally a church wall. Stone built to protect worshippers, not to withstand siege warfare. But it sat at a critical point in the terrain, and the civilian defenders spotted something the Ottoman generals completely missed. The settlement nestled in a natural bowl, rimmed by low hills on three sides. The fourth side faced a small river frozen just enough to be deadly for armored soldiers marching in formation, but not solid ground. Dead center in this natural fortress sat the church. Its wall wasn't imposing by military standards, maybe 13 to 16 feet high, but it was perched on a rise that commanded every approach route. The defenders weren't stupid. They knew 2,000 people couldn't hold the entire settlement. So they made a calculated decision: abandon everything except the church. Let the Ottomans pour into the outer streets unchallenged. This looked like surrender. It was the opposite. It was pure strategy. While the Ottomans spread through empty streets, convinced victory was theirs, the defenders were positioned behind that wall, watching, waiting. Every square foot of ground was a killing zone. They knew every stone, every alley, every firing angle. The Ottomans never saw it coming. The wall itself wasn't remarkable. What made it lethal was terrain. The hills funneled attackers into narrow routes. The frozen river cut off the flanks. The church wall stood at the exact choke point where all these routes converged, a bottle. And the Ottomans were walking straight into it. The defenders had spent weeks preparing, not building fortifications, not forging weapons, just studying the ground, mapping how 40,000 men would have to move, turning that approach into a death trap. They positioned archers on the highest points, clear sightlines over everything. They stockpiled stones, boiling oil, anything droppable. They reinforced the sections that would take the heaviest assault. Most importantly, they didn't need to defeat the entire army. They just needed to make the cost unbearable. Then the Ottomans would break. As the 40,000-strong army approached, the 2,000 defenders weren't waiting passively. They were transforming every stone into a weapon. What made this wall lethal wasn't height or thickness. It was the strategy. Most fortifications were designed to seal out attackers. This one was designed to massacre them. The defenders created overlapping kill zones. Archers were staggered along the wall at calculated points, not lined up on top easy targets. Instead, they used the church's architecture to create protected, interlocking firing positions. The wall wasn't straight. Buttresses, niches, side towers created angles. Each angle covered another. Try to scale one point and you'd face fire from 3, 4, sometimes 5 positions at once. There was no safe approach, but the genius was in resource management. 2,000 versus 40,000. In open field, it's a slaughter. But this wall didn't need all 2,000 exposed. Only a fraction manned the firing lines. The rest stayed protected, resting, reloading, preparing. When defenders exhausted, fresh ones rotated in. The attackers faced defenders at peak energy while they collapsed trying to scale the wall. Like fighting an enemy that never tired. The church's architecture made this rotation possible. Inner corridors, staircases, chambers that once served worship now became protected pathways. Defenders could move between positions without exposure, rest, reload, and return fresh, all invisible to the outside. But that wasn't all. The civilians understood military psychology the generals didn't. An army of 40,000 would rely on numbers. They'd expect easy victory. Overconfidence makes you careless. So the defenders set a trap. Along the wall's base at key points, they created obvious weaknesses. Sections that looked lower, less stable, vulnerable. Signs saying, "Attack here. This is your way in." Perfect bait. Except each weak point faced murderous crossfire from multiple angles. Soldiers climbing at those weak points entered zones of absolute death. No escape, no cover. Arrows, stones, and fire from every direction. The defenders made the bait too good to resist. They knew the commanders would send their elite troops first. Decimate the elite and morale collapses. That was the plan. The church wall's transformation was complete. from a worship space to a weapon multiplying each defender's power tenfold. Then the 40,000 soldiers arrived, certain they'd crush 2,000 civilians in hours. The plan executed perfectly. The attackers advanced exactly as predicted. The commanders looked at the wall, saw they outnumbered the defenders 40-1, and threw sophistication away. One massive frontal assault. With 40,000 soldiers, what could 2,000 possibly do? Thousands of professional soldiers poured forward in tight formation. The ground shook. The sound was like thunder. The civilians must have felt absolute terror. But they held. They waited. The attackers reached the wall and climbed exactly where the defenders wanted the prepared weak points. That's where the slaughter began. Every soldier who touched that wall faced fire from 5 directions. Arrows from above, stones from the walls, spears from angles that seemed impossible. The attackers didn't even know where the projectiles came from. Those trying to retreat found their own comrades blocked escape routes. Crushed against the base, completely exposed, completely defenseless. The wall revealed its true power. Interlocking fire with no escape. Every position covered another. Attack one point, expose yourself to 3 others. Attack those 3, and a 4th cuts you down. No blind spots, no safe angles. Every square inch lay within range of at least 3 separate firing positions. The commanders saw the slaughter and regrouped standard tactics. They analyzed and concluded they needed concentrated firepower at weak points. The second wave came, more focused. They identified sections with fewer defenders and piled thousands in at once. Overwhelmed the positions. Surely they couldn't kill them all. But the defenders expected this. Here the rotation system revealed its genius. As soon as the attackers concentrated forces at one point, the defenders in that sector simply fell back through the protected internal passages. They moved to adjacent positions, and other defenders, fresh and fully armed, took up the positions that had been abandoned. All of this happened in seconds. So fast that the attackers didn't even realize they were facing a completely different set of defenders. And while the attackers focused all their attention on one specific point, the defenders in the adjacent positions had free shots at the exposed flanks of the attacking formation. It was a lateral slaughter. Soldiers fell by the dozens, not even knowing where the fire that killed them was coming from. But what truly broke the assault was something the professionals couldn't grasp. The civilians fought with a savagery no hired army could match. These weren't mercenaries. They were defending home, family, survival. No alternative. Hold the wall or lose everything. That psychological intensity plus terrain advantage created a gap numbers couldn't bridge. It didn't matter that it was 40,000 against 2,000. What mattered was that at every point of actual contact, the defenders held absolute tactical superiority. The attackers began to understand this. The second wave failed just as badly as the first. Something shifted. The arrogant confidence evaporated. Soldiers hesitated. They looked at the bodies piled at the wall's base. They understood. Climbing that wall meant death. Desperate commanders tried everything. Money for the first man up the wall. Execution for retreat. Nothing worked. This wasn't about courage or discipline. It was math. Lethal geometry. The wall turned each defender into 10 fighters and each attacker into half. Wave after wave hit the wall. Every repelled attack, invader morale fell. Defender morale rose. The civilians on the wall realized something extraordinary. They were winning. Against impossible odds. They were holding off an army 20 times larger. Then, when the attackers' momentum was completely broken, the defenders did the unexpected. They counterattacked. Small groups slipped out through hidden side gates. They moved fast, exploiting the chaos and collapse of morale. They hit the exposed flanks of the enemy still crushed against the wall. Devastating. The soldiers, already shattered by wave after wave of failure, suddenly faced assault from behind. Panic. Units dissolved. Men threw down weapons and fled. The disciplined formation of a 40,000-strong professional army collapsed into chaos. The defenders on the wall, seeing this, intensified fire. No mercy, no breaks. Relentless pressure at every point. But the true horror was just beginning. That church wall, supposed to fall in hours, became one of history's most one-sided massacres. And it came down to a stone wall no one had taken seriously. At that moment, the battle shifted. Defense became slaughter. The Ottomans weren't contained, they were annihilated. The 40,000 soldier force began to fall apart. Not from cowardice, not from fatigue, because the wall turned every attack into execution. The first battalions were already decimated, but the commanders, convinced numbers would win, kept sending waves. Each wave met the same fate. The wall wouldn't allow them to mass. Forced into narrow spaces, they lost all coordination advantage. Defenders behind the wall aimed carefully. Every arrow found a target. Every stone had impact. The brutal equation. They couldn't retreat without shame. They couldn't advance without dying. Trapped in a killing zone, they couldn't escape. The defenders understood this. They exploited it ruthlessly. Every time attackers tried to pull back, arrows rained down on their backs. Panic, chaos, no reorganization possible. When Ottomans tried to regroup, defenders reinforced barricades, redistributed ammunition, prepared. Every pause became advantage. It went on like that for hours. The wall worked like a machine, never tired, never retreated, just killed. The numbers became brutal. Of 40,000 Ottoman soldiers, about 12,000 died or were wounded in the first days. Most at one place, the church wall. 12,000 killed by a structure that wasn't built for war, just a stone wall protecting prayer. But defenders' ingenuity made it an absolute weapon. The commanders were slow to accept reality. More soldiers didn't matter. More regrouping didn't matter. Different strategies didn't matter. The wall always won. Defense geometry was mathematically superior to attack geometry. The civilian leaders understood this from the start. They didn't try to outforce the enemy. They made it impossible to use force. That's the difference. Soldiers follow rules, civilians improvise, and in this battle, improvisation destroyed doctrine. Eventually, the commanders faced reality. More attacks meant more deaths. They tried besieging from other sides, but defenders had secondary positions ready. They tried negotiating surrender, but civilians refused. They held the advantage. After weeks of siege, casualties mounting, supplies gone, the Ottoman army made the only choice left: retreat. 40,000 professionals with the best weapons, experienced commanders. They withdrew from 2,000 civilians with improvised tools and survival instinct. All because a church wall taught a lesson conventional armies forget. In war, terrain isn't scenery, terrain is power. Use terrain right and numerical disadvantage becomes tactical advantage. This battle became a perfect case study in asymmetric warfare. Historians still study it because it proves something fundamental. Army size doesn't decide battles. The ability to use terrain does. The civilians had no formal training. No combat experience, no arsenals, just a wall. And the intelligence to turn it into a fortress. The Ottomans thought in terms of force. The defenders thought in terms of geometry. The attackers relied on numbers. The defenders relied on position. Position won. That's the lesson. When resources are unequal, victory goes to those who own the terrain. Those who use creativity instead of doctrine. Those who understand that defense isn't passivity. Defense is total control. That wall controlled every detail of that war. 2,000 civilians defeated 40,000 soldiers. Not miracle, not luck, but tactics, terrain, and determination to survive. The wall wasn't just stone. It was proof that ingenuity beats force applied right, at the right moment in the right place. Fascinated by this victory? Want more stories of smaller forces destroying superior armies through tactics alone? I have a video for you. It's about how 300 soldiers held a pass against tens of thousands. Link in the description. And if you love this real battles where brilliance beats raw power, subscribe. Every week I bring a military story that changes how you see strategy. That wall didn't just defend civilians. It proved thinking differently is more powerful than hitting harder. Sometimes the best weapon isn't what you carry. It's where you choose to fight.